They hear.
There really are instructions. You don't say this.
No, okay.
Because you need a meaning for this. For Kaddish, for Kedusha, for Baruch, you need a meaning.
Okay.
It usually has instructions. No, it doesn't say.
It doesn't,
Read the fine print. Look in the back of this book. They have a very good section of halacha, which explains certain parts of davening you're not allowed to do without a meaning. So whatever you can't do without a meaning, you can't do. Okay, hello everybody. Okay, so what's up? Okay, so I've been asked, I think it's every year, it just works out that way. That test Kislev, I speak to the girls at Mahon about the Mikla Rebbe, sort of like a tradition, I guess, at this point. At your own, yes, Ben.
My first ever lesson was this lesson a year ago.
Okay, how'd that work out?
And I stayed after having you.
So the Mikla Rebbe is holding you prisoner, hey?
Yeah.
Okay, what did my phone say? Only 50% charge. What's this here?
do you want a charger?
No, I can charge it, I just. Okay, I'm gonna plug in the charger, I'm gonna break it with it. Okay, plugging my charger as on my mic, because I don't want to get it by on me in the middle. Okay, so here's the situation, people. Situation is that I don't know you. And the problem with not knowing you is I don't know what you know, what you don't know. So I don't know what you need to hear, you know what I'm saying? I have to say something to you, but I have a lot of choices on what something I should say. So which something should I say? Say the first something, the second something, the third something, or the fourth something? Just say something, right? So in my ignorance, here's what I'm going to share. I hope it's relevant to you because I'm talking to you. Yesterday, the 9th of Kislev, is the birthday and the yahrzeit and the day of the anniversary of the passing. Yahrzeit actually means in English anniversary. Yahrzeit means yahrzeit, this time each year. Yahrzeit means anniversary. You're gonna a birthday is also a yahrzeit, but somehow it's become that yahrzeit means the day a person passes away. So it's the anniversary of the passing and the birth of the Mikla Rebbe, the second Lubavitcher Rebbe. He's the only one of our Rebbeim who had that special distinction that Moshe Rabbeinu has, as the Gemara says, who passed away on the same day he was born. He was born on the 9th of Kislev in the year 1833. And he passed away on his same birthday in the year, 17. He was born in 1773. And he passed away in 1827. Okay, the 54 years exactly to the date, to the Hebrew date. He was born the 9th of Kislev, Tav Kuf, Lamed Gimel, 1773. And he passed away, Kislev Tav Kuf Peiches, 1827. He was the oldest son of the Alter Rebbe, not the oldest child, he was the oldest son. Alter Rebbe had children, he had a hard time having boys. By the time the Mikla Rebbe was born, the Alter Rebbe was married 13 years. And he begged his Rebbe, the Holy Maggid the Mezritch, for a bracha for a son. And the Maggid resisted. His two oldest children were daughters, and they were gigantic women, giantesses, each one of their own way. They were extraordinary ladies. But he wanted a son, and the Maggid gave him a bracha for a son 3 days before he passed away, 2 days before he passed away. And he told him, don't forget about me. So the Mikla Rebbe carries the musician Maggid's name, Dovbed. He grew up in his father's shadow. His whole world was his father. When his father passed away, he was 40. He was 39. And he's one of the 7 Rebbes of Chabad. He's one of the Siyei Chabad, one of our Rebbes. The day after, which is today, the 10th of Kislev, in the year Tov Kuf Pei Vov, these are sort of really recently discovered precise dates, which is 1825. He was released from his incarceration. He was not really arrested in Mitzvah. He was invited to come to Vitebsk, to the capital of the state of Lubavitch, but it was the kind of invitation that you couldn't refuse. You know what I'm saying? An invitation that you can't refuse is not really an invitation. And he was kept in government housing. He was kept very respectably. He had a minion with him. He had his family with him. He was even able to say Chassidus, but he was being examined carefully for financial improprieties based on a false libel, which was levied against him by some people who wanted to extort money from him. That's the actual story. And he was liberated. He was let go on this day in the year 1826. Okay, how many years ago is that?
Wait, I thought you said 1885.
1885. Thank you for the correction. I'm the Hebrew.
1885?
1885. Tough group, 1885. 18.
But he died 1827.
1825. Thank you. I'm 1825. 1825. So it's next year, it'll be exactly 2 years from now. It'll be exactly 200 years since that liberation. It's interesting. So I could talk about a lot of different things, as long as I talk about the Middle Rebbe, right? So here's what I'm going to do with you. This is just my mood because of the rain.
1826, he was released.
1825. You Googled it, right? Right?
Oh, how about that?
I understand. There's new documents. 1825. I get into trouble for saying it, but the facts bore out. Because we always knew that he was released from prison 1 year before he passed away. But the previous Rebbe told the Rebbe, we're not really sure about it. And now we found out for sure. They found the documents that it was 1825. Okay, so whatever I do is no good. But listen, I teach it the way I think I should. In Yom it says 1826. But like I said, the previous Rebbe told the Rebbe in private that we're not sure about the year, and now we are sure because they found the documents. The government gave out a file. The Russian government had a file which they never threw away. They don't throw anything away in Russia. In relationship with this episode. The Baal Shem Tov founded Chassidus. You know that? Baal Shem Tov founded Chassidus. And it belongs to him. Chassidus is the Baal Shem Tov. Chassidus is a gift that God gave the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov gave the gift of Chassidus to us. And a very big part of the gift of Chassidus is the gift of the Baal Shem Tov himself, of the personality of the Baal Shem Tov. Or to say it in more comprehensive words, it's the personality of the tzaddik, which is a very, very important part of the whole version of Yiddishkeit that is Chassidus. The role of the tzaddik is very, very central. In our tradition, in our lexicon, in our language, we define by Chassidus by many different terms. And one of them is, in quotes, the precious stone, which is the base of the king's crown. I don't know if you know the story. Do you know the story? Where the Alter Rebbe was once in the position to defend his Rebbe, the Holy Maggid, for being too liberal for the dissemination of Chassidus. So he told him a story about the precious stone, which is the base of the king's crown. The story was that there was a king who was an heir to a dynasty that went back hundreds of years, that was very successful and very blessed. And the king didn't have any children. And they were afraid that when he would die, the dynasty would end, and the people prayed that God gave him a son. And then the son got sick. And they couldn't find a cure. And the son was near death when they realized that the crown that this king wore, which was an heirloom, he inherited from his father and his father and his father since the beginning of the dynasty. At the base of the crown, there was a mineral that had a healing property, that if they would grind it up into a powder and feed it to this little prince, it could save his life. But the prince was incredibly ill. He was near death. And destroying this crown, which was the symbol of the kingdom, was a big deal. So they came to the king and he asked him what to do. And the king said, "What do I need a crown if I have no crown prince? Smash my crown, take out the stone, grind it into a powder. Maybe he'll ingest a few drops and it'll bring him back to life." And that's what they do. And the Alter Rebbe explained that that's what Chassidus is. Chassidus is a very deep level of Torah. The honest truth is we don't even know what Chassidus is. We don't even know what we were given. We're not qualified to appreciate how great a gift Chassidus is because we're just not sensitive enough. What Chassidus is called, the precious stone, which is the base of the king's crown. And the king is God. Not Sancheriv. The king is the Eibush. The Eibush has a crown. At the base of his crown is this special stone. This stone, which is a very deep and holy commodity, which Jews for thousands of years did not have access to, was given as a gift to the Baal Shem Tov. And it wasn't given as a gift to the Baal Shem Tov because of our worthiness. It wasn't given to the Baal Shem Tov because we were better than our predecessors, better than our ancestors. It was given to the Baal Shem Tov because otherwise we were going to die. You understand? The Jewish people needed something to keep them alive in the last several centuries, last 300 years, which many would argue were the most difficult years of our entire history. And the Baal Shem Tov was given this gift from heaven, from on high. It's called the precious stone, which is the base of the king's crown. We call it Chasidus, we call it by other names, we call it Yechida, a lot of other names. But this gift that the Baal Shem Tov gave is the reason we're sitting here. There's no question about that. It helped the Jewish people survive the most difficult centuries of their exile. The story of Hasidus, however, is Hashem gave Baal Shem Tov a gift. This gift is godliness. It's godliness. We don't even know what godliness means. We use the word all the time, right? If you're a Chabadnik and you learn a little Chassidus, godliness is like bread and butter, breakfast and lunch is godliness, Godliness, Ein Sof. We don't understand what these things mean. Chassidus is godliness. It's a divine power. It's a transcendent thing. It's something which has no form. It's higher than any kind of a form that has incredible power. The trick to Chassidus is not that God gave the Baal Shem Tov this gift. It's not that the Baal Shem Tov gave this gift to his disciples. The trick of Chassidus is the packaging. The trick of Chassidus, the role of the Rebbe, so the tzaddikim, is to find form, packaging, to help us digest it. Right? You guys, you girls are into health, I'm sure. And you take medicine, you take vitamins, you take minerals. I'm sure there's a big fight there. If you should or you shouldn't, there's a million. Everything has many opinions. Everything. If you don't take these vitamins, you know what's going to happen. If you do take these vitamins, you know what's going to happen. And everybody's absolutely sure. 100%, there's no doubt about it. And you can just research and their studies. Oh, that guy's never sugar then. No, you guys totally nuts. That's how it goes. But everybody has facts. But one of the things that's true about medicines in general and vitamins and minerals, inorganic chemicals that we take into our system, is that it's not a big deal to put the pill in. It's a very big deal for the body to recognize it as something that it shouldn't just send out, but that it should break it down and it will use it. You take all the pills in the world, if they're cheap, the body's going to send out that it's not going to recognize. So it's all about it's about processing it. But the pill that you take, you spend a lot more money for a pill that has the same exact chemical compound, the same exact minerals or vitamins, and you're paying more money not because it's different substances, but because it's a better designed pill. The body will digest it better. You'll get more out of it. It's like people eat food. Some people eat food and they're always hungry because they have problems with their metabolism. It's a serious thing. You can eat and be. A guy told me my father eats and he's dying of hunger. Pashut, because he has some kind of a problem with his bowels. These are real serious things. So it's not only about eating food, it's eating food that you can digest. It's not on taking medicine that you can digest. And that was the Baal Shem Tov's challenge. I gave him a gift and a job. The gift was the precious stone, which is the basis of the king's crown. The job was deliver it to the people. Give the people this gift in a way that will give them life. Give this gift to the people in a way that will actually warm their hearts and enlighten their minds and lift up their spirits. And that's the story of Hasidus. The story of Hasidus is not the holiness of Hasidus. It's the ability to take that holiness and use it practically to create Hasidim. That's what the idea is. To create people who are not all holy, not all righteous, not all, very few of us are holy, right? We're just plain people. But Hasidus nourishes us spiritually. And it nourishes us because this mineral, the precious stone, which is the basis of the king's crown, which God gave the Baal Shem Tov, has been delivered to us in the kind of way that we are able to actually process it and benefit from it. So I don't know how much you know about the history of Hasidus, but the history of Hasidus is all about plurality. It's all about diversity through the great American term. Baal Shem Tov was one man. He had many students. They all ate at the same trough, all out of the same dish. But each one had a distinctly different interpretation. And that interpretation was a combination of what they heard from the Baal Shem Tov and who they were. And they were very, very holy men, very brilliant men. And each one took from the Baal Shem Tov the same Hasidus in a different flavor. And their disciples reflect them. So over time, Hasidus becomes very, 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 very diverse. All different types. All come from the same anchor, it's coming from the same root. The reason it's diversified is because many of the holy masters who were disciples of the Baal Shem Tov, or disciples of his disciple, had the task of processing the Hasidus that they got, and then packaging the Hasidus that they processed and giving it to their followers in a way that reflected them. And over time, Hasidus became what it is, a very pluralistic movement. There's so many different types of Hasidus. Now, as an outsider, they all look the same, Hasidim. Hasidim too. Hasidim. But Hasidim, Hasids, if you look inside, is incredibly complex, very diverse. It's interesting. I'm reading a book on adults now, and I'm immersed in that world. It's interesting to me how distinct, it's very interesting how distinctive, how each group is so strong and distinctive in its approach. I think it's beautiful, but it's part of the story. However, by the Baal Shem Tov, there was one limitation, which was that when he passed away, one man was chosen to be his successor, one man. So although during his lifetime he had what they call 60 disciples, like the number that they used, who each took the same Hasidus, the same Rebbe, and qualified the Hasidus based on who they were and gave it to the Hasidim in a way which is a reflection of them. But when the Baal Shem Tov passed away, one person was chosen to lead the movement. His name was Rabbi Paltiel, same name as the Mitzvah Rebbe, who was the Yartzeit and birthday we commemorated yesterday, the Chag HaGeula, the redemptive day we celebrate today. But we take the Baal Shem Tov's successor, by the Baal Shem Tov's instruction. And he did the same thing that his master did. He took Hasidus that he got from his Rebbe with his version of packaging. His version of packaging, the way it's explained, was mystical, very Kabbalistic. And he gathered around him a following of, we say, 120 men, as the Rebbe said. All of these people were incredibly holy and incredibly intelligent, very great scholars, deep, deep, deep servants of God Almighty. They worship God. That's the bottom line. A good Jew is a servant of God, and not successful on the stock market. He's a servant. He serves Hashem as an individual person with humility. Each one got the Hasidus, the Baal Shem Tov, the precious stone, which is the base of the king's crown that the Baal Shem Tov got, that he packaged and gave to the Maggid then repackaged in his version, which is Kabbalah, and gave it to each one of 120 disciples. And when he passed away, and the truth was, even during his lifetime, he instructed his Talmidim to open up different shops. And it was really happened after he passed away. Also, there's reasons why this was done. There was a deliberate decision to diversify Hasidus, not to keep it under a singular umbrella. Like by the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid, there was one Rebbe. The Baal Shem Tov, the Medina Maggid's disciples, each one opened up their own shop. They actually literally took out a map and they divided up Eastern Europe. Each one took a piece. This is my territory. This is your territory. Do not trespass. Like we had a last week's Pasha. Robin says to Yankovina, you can cross over the line. but they have to come in peace, just for business. They can't come for war. Remember Rashi Shvi, right? This mountain is a testimony, is a marker that you can cross, but only for pragmatic, want to do business. Don't come and make trouble. And it said, Dikim of Poland, the Dikim of the disciples, did that with the map. And they divided up Eastern Europe amongst themselves. They'll never got peace in Russia. But he had a very difficult peace because he was right on the spearhead of the arrow of the Misnagdim. So a lot of his friends who had neighboring pieces ran away. Now they wouldn't say it that way, but that's what happened. They left. They left in a dignified. A number went to Israel. Another moved. Some of them moved towards the now called Ukraine, which was much more Hasidic centric. And the Alter Rebbe ended up with a much larger territory than he was entitled to, simply because of vacancies. He expanded to all of Russia. And the Alter Rebbe created his own packaging, his own version of Chassidus. It's the same thing. It's all the Baal Shem Tovs. The Baal Shem Tov, how many times do I have to say it? Yeah, until you're all bored. The Baal Shem Tov was given a gift by God. It's the precious stone with the base of the king's crown. It's a godly power that touches the soul. And each one of the holy masters, their role was to package it and give it to their disciples in a way that they could ingest it and be warned by it. And each one of them did it differently. They did it differently because of different personalities themselves. They did it differently because they lived in different parts of Europe, and the people had different personalities. South Lebanon lived in Russia, in Breno town. Everyone was smart and stuck up. Forgive me for saying that. So he created Chabad. Oh, Marbim and Now it's much more complicated than that. The Maggid actually told him that it was his mandate to do this, but he created a very distinctive Chassidus. It's still Chassidus, same old story. There's no new Chassidus. If it's new Chassidus, then it's not Chassidus. It's something else. Chassidus is one and has one master. The master of all of Chassidus to Mashiach al-Zaviyan is Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. It's all here, Baal Shem Tov. But over time, the different Rebbe's packaged it distinctly, and then it became their wisdom. But what has happened over the generation is the concept of dynasty. Not every one of the Baal Shem Tov disciples was a Rebbe. Not every one of the Baal Shem Tov disciples who was a Rebbe had a son who succeeded him. Understand? Not every one of the Mezitcher Maggid's disciples was a Rebbe. Not every one of the Mezitcher Maggid's disciples who was a Rebbe had a chain. But some did. And some of those chains continue to this very day. I'll give you an example by contrast. You've all heard of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Aditya, who is a famous Rebbe, yeah? But his sons died before him. There's no Baditchevet dynasty. There's a person. He lived, he made a big, bright light in the sky when he was here. He left us his Sefer, the Kedushat Levi, and he left us more than anything else his stories, the stories of his love for the Jewish people, and always finding a positive spin on the worst Jews. But he's a man. There's no Baditchevet continuation. And the same is true with different Hasidus. Every Hasidus is different. Some lasted a generation, some lasted 2 generations, and some have lasted the test of time and are still here to this day and are quite successful and powerful. Amongst the most famous dynasties that are still around today would be the Ruzhin dynasty, Friedman. They're not known by Ruzhin anymore. They have a lot of other names. They're called Bayan, they're called Chartikov, they're called Racham Strip. But they come back to the Yisrael Ruzhin, Israel of Ruzhin, who was actually a direct descendant of the Holy Maggid and Maviki, his great-grandson. And they have a dynasty which is very big and very successful and very complex. But the Ruzhin and Chassidus, you can see. Give me a minute. You can identify. You can see when you meet. They're close to us. They're more Russian. They're less dressed up. It's less about the form and more about the substance. I'm sorry for saying it this way it is. Another example of a dynasty we consider test of time, which is also Russian, is Stalin. Karolin, you may have heard Stalin, Kalinders and Stalin and Rebbe. They've survived by many miracles because they had a number of Rebbes who became Rebbes in the cradle. Literally, this current Stalin Rebbe was announced that Rebbe when he was a newborn, because his grandfather predicted that he would be born. True story. Imagine becoming a Rebbe before you're born. Kind of weird. But this happened more than once. Another example of a dynasty which has stood the test of time is Chernobyl. You heard of Chernobyl? You ever know about Chernobyl? We know about Chernobyl for the wrong reason. But there's no Hasidus called Chernobyl. It's called Skver. You're a Skver Hasidus, Racham Strip. This is Chernobyl dynasty, also very, very successful till this day, several hundred years, and very diversified. And there are many more smaller Hasidus that belong to Chernobyl. And there are other famous dynasties. Maybe one of the largest would be what's called Tzanz, Tzantv, Tzanz, of Chaim of Tzanz. He started much later. He was not a Talmud of the Makom Magid. He was a student of these great men. But his last name is Halberstam. And which Hasidic Rebbe is not Halberstam? Bober is Halberstam. Satmar is Halberstam. Kloisenberg is Halberstam. So these are Hasidic forms, and they're really different. They're different flavors. They're very, very different flavors. If you're inside, you know how different you are. You're wearing the same, same fur hat with the same watch, but they're culturally and religiously deeply different. And the more you delve into it, the more you realize it's not just a bunch of people walking around looking the same. They have their shit, they have their opinion, their approach. And it's beautiful to see how single-minded they are. You're in that world, there's nothing else. And Bells is a great example. It's so interesting. So I grew up with Bells as kids in Crown Heights. And I'm first understanding now, they're as proud of what they are as we are being Lubavitch, really. And they're so strong. The deep roots. And also Bells. Bells doesn't go back to the Mizrach Magid. Bells goes back to approximately the time of the Tzemach Tzedek. So it's considered a late comer to the game of the evolution of Chassidus, but it stood the test of time. You understand what I'm saying? So some of these groups, some of these Rebbes who created packaging, who lasted for a generation or two, some of them have stood the test of time. And some of them, they trace their roots back to great personalities like the Chayzer of Lublin, the Seer of Lublin, or the Aptadov, the Rabban Yeshua of Apt. Those Hasidus no longer exist, but a lot of their babies, a lot of their disciples have created Hasidic groups that have stood the test of time. You understand? That's how these things go. And one of those branches is Lubavitch, Chabad. And we're right, they're wrong. Of course, what kind of question is that? You don't have to say that. Why? Because we're us and they're them. It's as simple as that. How can we be wrong? We're us. How can I be wrong? I'm never wrong. Me? Ask my wife. That's when I'm wrong. Okay. And the Alter Rebbe created a unique Chassidus. And my interest in this conversation is not to give you a Chassidus lesson, although that's what I'm just doing, but to explain to you the place of the Alter Rebbe. There are a number of factors. The first factor, Alter Rebbe lived in Lithuania. Alter Rebbe lived in Lithuania. He lived in a part of Europe where the people were very learned, very interested in learning, Talmud, Gemara, very learned. And he understood that the Hasidic form he creates has to be very intellectual. And Chabad Hasidus is without a doubt the most intellectual. It's not even close. It's very intellectual. Chabad Hasidus is very intellectual, with a great emphasis on learning. I mean, the average Hasidic group has one volume to study out, one book of Hasidic, 2 or 3. We got hundreds. Because they read their books in the Hebrew. They read a few lines and they get excited. We read pages and pages and pages and walk away frustrated because they didn't understand. It's a whole that they're trying to be inspired. They're trying to be enlightened. They're trying to understand. That's the first. And the second thing, and this is fascinating, and now it's coming home to roost, is the Alter Rebbe's vision was to create a chassidus where you could be a chassid in the absence of a physical Rebbe. Alter Rebbe's vision, and this was what he was told to do, was to create chassidus where the chassid has all the tools he needs to make himself the chassid without the direct contact with the tzaddik. Because in most groups, the tzaddik is the anchor of the chassidus. Not only the anchor of the chassidus in terms of its philosophy, in terms of its tradition, in terms of its history, but in terms of its work, its inspiration. The essence of Chassidus is true. It's true of Lubavitch also, but in a different way, is the relationship between a Chassid and a Rebbe. No question about it. Without a Rebbe, you're not a Chassid. You're a good Jew, but the Chassid-Rebbe relationship and the integrity of that, the depth of that bond between a holy person and a regular common person, that's really deep and really works and has to do with life every day, is critical. Chabad, the Alter Rebbe, created a Hasidus where there's so much in the books that you can open up a book and have a Rebbe. You understand? You can open up a book and have a Rebbe. Without meeting the Rebbe face to face, you can have Hasidus in their Seder. And today you find in other Hasidic groups that because of the darkness of Golos, they're turning to Chabad. They like their tradition. They don't want to go to the tradition, but they're literally asking themselves, I had men in my house who told me this straight to my face. We don't understand what Hasidus is. We know it's not Cholent. What is it? And in the other groups, they don't have an answer because the answer was the people, the Rebbe, the Tzaddikim, who unfortunately they don't physically have. But in Chabad, you have the Hasidus in the Sefer, in the learning. And that's a very, very big part of the unique role the Alter played in Hasidus. And you must understand that at the time, when he did this, he was severely criticized. He was severely criticized by most, not all, by most of his friends, of his contemporaries. His guys who studied at the feet of the Midrash with him were criticized him because they felt that Hasidus is all about the personal relationship between the Chassid and the Rebbe. And putting it into books is creating a greater distance from the Rebbe. They felt it was antithetical to the spirit and the intent of the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid. But the Alter Rebbe didn't really defend himself. He just separated himself. When they got hot in the kitchen, he opened up a new, built another kitchen. He didn't fight with anybody. He just did his thing. But the Alter Rebbe said, this was my mandate. This I was told to do. And the Alter Rebbe explained how ultimately a Chassid has a Rebbe, but the Chassid Hasidus cannot be dependent on the Rebbe after his own effort, his own work, his own accomplishment, his own life. That's part of the reason why the Alter Rebbe created an intellectual Hasidus. Now you wanted to say something, and I didn't let you speak, and I forgot that you had a question, but I remembered now, so I'm letting you speak now. I forgot your question.
I think it was about the other. Oh yeah, I wanted you to write this and put it on the board.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
You can Google it. Hasidic sects, and you get a bunch of names written in anglicized Polish, and you'll have to put the braces on your braces to pronounce them correctly. Okay. But let's get to the point. Let's get to the point, because I've been beating around the bush. What is this precious stone, which is the basis of the King's God? What is it? Again, the word that we use is godliness. I mean, there's not a lot of words that are more overused than godliness, right? Godliness is like good morning. God, what is godliness? No one ever met him, but we talk about him all the time. We like to meet him, right? It's very important, godliness. I guess the most succinct way to explain Hasidus is this. It's founded on the deep belief that every Jew has a soul, a godly soul. And his or her Judaism radiates from the soul, not from the mind. It's axiomatic, it's fundamental, it's foundational to the Hasidic way of thinking and to the Hasidic philosophy of life and the Hasidic exercise, practice. That the beginning of a relationship with God is our soul, not our mind, not our ego, not even our heart, our soul. Whereas the Rebbe would say it hundreds and hundreds of times, you never teach a Jew what it means to be a Jew to help him discover it. Or alternatively, there's no such thing as a Jew who's far away because God's inside him if it doesn't uncover it. This is a foundational philosophical idea, which is at the core of every Hasidus. The Baal Shem Tov and any one of his disciples, the Holy Magna, his disciples, the Alter Rebbe, his contemporaries, and one of their disciples. This is the constant. Hasidus talks, it speaks to the divine soul. And the idea of Hasidus is to trigger that. So, in other words, I don't got to tell you that life is hard. Maybe I do have to tell you, I don't know. Life is challenging. It's challenging even if everything goes right, it's still plenty. It doesn't always go so right. Life is hard. Life is whatever life is, it's challenging. And you can't just survive. You're not animal. You have to live with meaning, with joy, with purpose, and with creativity and with accomplishment, but to live. And then on top of that, to tell you, you got to look at Jew. You have to serve God. It's a lot. It's a lot. And you have to draw strength from someplace. You have to have power to do all this. You have to have power to daven every day and to raise your children, look after your husband, and do your shlichus. And there's so much to do. It's amazing. Yeah, and it's the truth of the matter. We sometimes look at, it's so many jobs. There's so much to do. If we take those things away from us, we'll go out of our mind. We need that work to stay alive. Don't misunderstand. The work keeps us from going cool. But you need motivation. So there are different types of motivation. Chassidus came to this earth, came into the world, at a very opportune moment, a very special time. It was the eve of the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment already occurred, but the eve of the revolution, the technical revolution, and the revolution of industry and science and technology, which changed the world in so many ways. It didn't just give us new science. It built large cities and large factories and urban centers. I mean, the whole world has changed, but the science has made people live with so many, first, so many more of us. You take science out of the world, we're not 8 billion. We're just not. And we don't live in these massive cities with apartment buildings that are 100 stories high. You can, in one square kilometer, you can house thousands of people, literally. We figured out how to live right on top of each other. Animals can't do that. So the world has been changed by it. Baal Shem Tov came along at the very onset of all of these revolutions. And he gave us this gift. What is this gift? This gift is the power to trigger the divine soul. That's what it is. See this? The gift that God gave to Baal Shem Tov was an incredibly powerful tool that wakes up Yiddish in his shamet, makes a Jewish soul. Or to say it in other words, the Chassidus, by definition, talk to your soul and not to your mind, ever. Chassidus doesn't believe that the way to a person's heart is through his mind. Chassidus believe the way to a person's relationship with God is through his neshama. And this precious stone, which God Almighty gave to Baal Shem Tov then packaged and gave to his disciples, then repackaged and gave it to their disciples. And then over time he developed these dynamics. Everything I said before. The stone itself is a holy power that wakes up like Yiddish in his Shabbat, wakes up the Jewish soul. We live in an age of reason. I don't want to call it an age of reason. I want to call it an age of information. And we have information overload. I mean, we all now understand how dangerous information is. You know, we used to say information is the best thing in the world. But you have to process it. And you have to see through it. And you have to be able to distill. I got up this morning. The first thing I do every day, and I have to admit it, is I look online what's going on in Israel, you know. But you read 6 different sources of news and you get 6 different versions of the same story. And they're diametrically opposed. It's like 2 people describing the same event happening at the same time, the same place, and you would never know it's happening in the same universe. Because the information is not good unless it's true. And this information, there's so much out there, it's so difficult to know who to trust, who to believe. It's really, in other words, information is not so simple. Knowing more doesn't make you a better person, it makes you a more confused person. Figuring out what to do with your knowledge and how to use your knowledge, that makes you a great person. And we're very good at the information. We're very, very bad at the process. We're so gullible. We're so swept away by fears and fever that we very often don't discriminate. Many people, I would say most people, don't judge for themselves. And therefore they know so much and they're not informed. How could a person know so much and not be informed? Because he hasn't decided for himself intelligently what the information means. The Baal Shem Tov did not come into this world to give the world more information. Even more information of Torah. Baal Shem Tov came into this world to find a point in the Jewish soul which is deeper than the world of information. It's the inherent connection to God. Triggering that neshama will help us process the information. Triggering that neshama will help us figure out how to live in this world in 2024 or 25. But the Baal Shem Tov solution to the onset of the new age was to read this world of power that wakes up Jewish souls. Now we know what that means. Some of us know it personally, some of us know the stories. It's a magical thing. Waking up on the neshama is a magical thing. I was a teenager girl 45 years ago. And I used to go on Mr. Sunny on Beverly Boulevard in Los Angeles. And had a route every Friday, making friends. I was 16, I was 15. I go into these stories and men in their 50s, and I put tefillin on them and they would start to cry. And when I think about it now, you know what the most impressive thing about it was? I wasn't even surprised that a 60-year-old man puts on tefillin and starts crying. It's nuts. It just made sense that a Yid puts on tefillin and he cries. And I remember his grandfather and his grandfather's grandfather, it wakes up the neshama. And the whole of Hasidus is triggering the soul. It's really waking up the neshama. The Baal Shem Tov wanted the Jews' center of their practical daily religious life shouldn't be their mind, it would be their neshama. That's his revolution. That's his idea, the revolution. Now you need to understand, lightning in a bottle, hit and run is one thing. Doing tshuva is one thing. Living a frum life is quite another. You've probably figured that out already. Sustaining it, making it into something which you can do for the rest of your life. And Chassidus is not only hit and run, you understand? Chassidus is not just about the awakening. It's about keeping the fire burning. Everybody has a moment when the neshama wakes up. And then she goes back to sleep. And we go back to sleep. And we go back to being confused by the information again. And afraid, which is the trademark of most human beings. Afraid of what? Of the fact that they don't know and understand. And they don't trust. Nobody, including God. You see what I'm saying? The trick of Chassidus is to wake up the neshama and keep him awake, or her awake. And this is the story of the different Hasidic movements. Now, Lubavitch today is very into tshuva, but Lubavitch today is into staying about tshuva, not just being about tshuva and becoming an FNB. You know what I'm saying? Staying alive, staying real. And that real is keeping the fire of that neshama, the God inside of me, awake. And that's the story of the packaging, people. That's the story of the packaging. That's the story of the different Hasidic Rebbe's. That's the story of different philosophies, different cultures. They're all after the same end. Wake up a Jewish soul and keep them awake. And the Alter Rebbe's approach was Chochmah being never done. Use the mind as the way not just to wake up the neshama, but to keep her awake. You wanted to say. And this time it wasn't even that much time.
I have a question.
I figured that, but you raised your hand.
What happened? Okay, it's not the other thing. What happened if you like wake a person, like do something that would wake a person's neshama up and you don't see it that effect?
They try again.
Hmm.
That's what you do. Try again. Try different ways. We have another person to try. It's up to God. We do our part. We've got to finish us.
So it sounds like you're saying that there are different dynasties for the different expressions of Hasidus and waking people up in a different way that that group of people need. But how do you explain then how someone could be raised like a Hornsteifler and come to God or vice versa?
We're cousins, you know that.
Yeah.
How do you know this?
I grew up in Milwaukee.
Hornsteifler.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you didn't say Satma, you said Hornsteifler. You pronounced it really correctly. Because of because you're drawn to it. That's why. There's a lot of reasons. I mean, if you know, all the Jews who lived in the Soviet Union are Lubavitch. They weren't all. Some of them were Misnagdim. But if you lived in the Soviet Union in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, and you wanted to be from, you had no choice. There were no alternatives. Because nobody else had a community. Sometimes that's the reason. And sometimes it's plus because you're neshama. People go from one chassidus to another because they don't feel fulfilled. And then the other chassidus works for them. That happens. It happens. It happens. The honest truth is, have you ever heard of a Menachem Mendel Kotz? Have you ever heard of Menachem Mendel Kotz? You're nodding like you don't want to be sure if you want to know.
My brother-in-law said stories, but I don't remember them.
Okay, but you've heard his name.
Yeah.
The Menachem Mendel Kotz was the third in the dynasty. And his dynasty actually is very small, but there are other great dynasties that come from his, like Gur, Gerech Hasidus come from him, Alexander Hasidus come from Kotz. Their whole thing was the founder of what we call the Kotz movement was actually, it was called Peshischa. The first Rebbe of that dynasty was the Yid HaKadosh, the holy Yid from Peshischa. His son was the Bunim of Peshischa, his disciple was the Bunim, and his disciple was the Menachem Mendel Kotz. You talk about the time of the Alter Rebbe, in the middle of that. You know what the issue was then? That Hasidus was becoming a culture. In the time of the Alter Rebbe, there was already a revolution. In the time of the Alter Rebbe, Hasidus had become so comfortable that it became, you could speak very comfortably in Hasidus. And he couldn't stand it. The Yiddish said, it's about avoid, it's about work. The first, when you become a chassid, from not being a chassid, you sacrifice your life for what Chassidus brings you. What about your children and your grandchildren? You get used to it. You fall asleep inside Chassidus. So in Chassidus, there were revolutions to keep Chassidus fresh. And this is the challenge of every chassid. So many of us are asleep at the wheel. We just like our life. I'm chassid, I do mitzvahim, I'm on shlichus, but the edge of a chassid is a challenge that each chassid faces in his or her own personal life to keep that truth vibrant, current, fresh. You understand what I'm saying? It's a constant challenge. It's a constant challenge.
How do you do it?
You do what you got to do. You learn Chassidus. You go to Chassidus Shafabrengen. You take yourself seriously. You don't make it into a joke. It's work. W-O-R-K. It's a four-letter word. It belongs to that group. You understand? It's work, avodah. And every Chassidus is different. When you read about the people in Israel who every Friday night, after the meal, they get together and they just sing for hours. Every week. Not 22-year-olds, 60-year-olds. It's a part of their Chassidus. It's amazing. It's beautiful. It costs a lot. They would not go to sleep Friday night. They were not tired of Friday night. This is what they do. Now, maybe it's not your derech, but that is a sacrifice being made to keep a person's fire burning. It's very much about the community. And Chabad, the individual, is much more important because it's get with yourself. The Fabreyan is a very important part of inspiration, but you can't do the work in a community. You sit by yourself and break your own head. Anyway, so this is the story of Chassidus. This is the story of Chassidus. So, if Chassidus are waking up the soul, the magic of Chassidus, the packaging of Chassidus, the ability to ingest Chassidus is about the process that a tzaddik develops to wake up the soul of his Chassidus. That's what it's about. And there's no question that the most important component of all of that is direct contact with Chassidus and the Rebbe. Because the Rebbe, a real Rebbe, is a neshama man, a neshama person. Which means when you walk into his presence, he doesn't just see your body, to understand your mind and your heart. He sees your soul. And he's a master of soul. That's what he is. That's what a Rebbe is. He's a soulistic man, soulistic person. And his soul touches your soul and charges it up. But then there's the culture, there's the food, there's the singing, there's the dancing, there's the storytelling. There's a lot of things that all contribute to make this fire burn and to keep the fire burning. And each Chassidus is different. What about Chabad? Chabad has the Fabrengen, it's true. But the centerpiece of Chabad is the Maimed. It's the Hasidic discourse. It's not the kind of gefilte fish you serve, or the kind of Nigunim you sing. It's the Chabad Maimed, the Maimed. And a Maimed is not easy. It's hard to listen to, it's hard to understand, it's hard to remember, hard to internalize, hard to process.
Hard to be here early now.
I'm sorry to hear that.
So hard.
Okay, so it's work just to understand. In Lubavitch, they didn't hand out food; they handed out chassidus. In other communities, they handed out food, mamish. Now, I'm not. My intention is not chas v'shalom to put anybody down. I'm just pointing out it was a very different the philosophy that created the culture of the different Hasidus, versus Chabad, is very, very distinct. The centerpiece of Chabad was the Maimed. If you had no business with a Maimed, you had no need to be in the Lubavitch. You was boring. The accommodations were terrible. Chabad is notorious. They were terrible, terrible. No place to sleep, no food to eat. Nobody thought about you. You came, you slept on a bed. And you had a meeting with the Rebbe where you talked about how your doctor is good enough, not about how your family needs brothers. And you came to the Baruch Chassidus for a mind. So the kind of people drawn to Chabad traditionally. Today, everything is very different, and we all know and understand. With the brighter people, smart people. Some of them already learned it already. And they came to the Alter Rebbe, and then later to the Mittel Rebbe, whose Chag HaGeula, whose redemption day is today, whose birth anniversary of passing was yesterday, which is why we're having this conversation, for the mining, for the teaching. And the belief was, you don't go to your Rebbe to get inspired. You go to the Rebbe to get instructions about how to inspire yourself. You don't just get the instructions, get the tools. The tools is the dach, the dividend, the chassid itself, the mind of itself. Okay, you want to break for 5?
Yeah.
Okay, come back in 5 minutes.
Would you say that again? You don't go to the Rebbe to be inspired, you go to the Rebbe.
Get instructions about how to inspire yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, 5 minutes. Bring a cup of water. I'll drink it. Is that passive aggressive or is that honest?
Can it be both?
Yeah.
Iran Supreme Leader says US, Israel, and Turkey behind the fall of Assad. Turkey is the arch enemy of Israel in America, but now we're friends again. It's so interesting. But he has to appreciate that I'm making an exception. Because the Messiah was so short, so most of the Chassidim by the Samach Tzedek remember the Mitzvah Rebbe, and some also remember the Alter Rebbe, so he became out in the Rebbe Shlita. By the time the Samach Tzedek was established, there was almost nobody around who remembered the Mitzvah.
Rabbi Paltiel, people ask you questions at the time?
Yeah, I don't know his answer, but thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Ay, ay, ay. It's gotten to the point. We took a break. A girl just sent me a message from Israel. Hello, what happened to the recording? She's watching us live and we took a break. It's hysterical. Yeah. I'm so busy. I must need a secretary. I don't, sometimes I miss important messages. If I need an office, I can't just pay. I need infrastructure. I don't have the money. It's true, I don't have the money. But I need the environment that will allow me to do that. I am Rabbi Paltiel, but I'm spread very thin. I sometimes miss important communication, which is a very serious thing. Are we ready to start or what? Okay, we're starting?
Yeah.
How's everybody? Oh,
Remember last week you said there's not enough people?
Yeah.
How the whole class is full?
no, the whole school is here.
The whole school is here.
We gotta get more students in the school. Yeah. Oh, stop it. They get anti-Semitic, these phones really very, they went to the Taliban, yeah. Don't really get the guy to work, turn them off. Oh, he went off. Come on, terms and conditions. I have this phone for 2 years, now you give me terms and conditions. Okay, shall we? Ready? Yeah, we're ready? Yes. Yeah. But there's a little pattern, I think it's in Hayyim, where it says, the Alter Rebbe is the ultimate resurrector of the dead. There's nothing more lifeless than the human mind. The Alter Rebbe made it the key to the human soul. A lot of people are afraid of the brain. Religious people are afraid of the brain. When you get too smart, you start getting too smart. It becomes it's very dangerous. I love to say, I saw once in the Ralbag, I can't find it, but I saw it in the Ralbag. He writes, how come there's so many atheists? So the answer is because there's a lot of people, too many people who are not smart enough. They're smart, but not smart enough. So you understand enough to think you know, but you're not smart enough to understand that you don't know everything, and therefore you form opinions prematurely. But I was not afraid of the brain. I heard once from a famous, not Lubavitcher though, 2 men were not afraid of the human mind. The Rambam and the Alter Rebbe. He saw the mind as a tool, as a key to the soul. That's his trick. He created a Hasidus, and he gave us thousands of Maimonim. For the 7 Rebbes, he has thousands of Maimonim. Every Maimon has inside of itself the precious stone which is the base of the king's crown. And of course, above all else, the Gilas HaKesed is the Maimon of Maimonim. We call it Tanya, that we learn and we learn and we learn and we never finish learning. Tanya Kadisha. These Maimonim carry Hasidus. They carry this precious stone which is the base of the king's crown. That's what they carry. That's what they have inside of themselves. And we learn them when we understand them. Try to understand. It's not so easy. It's still not so easy to understand. And we learn them and try to understand them. The Alter Rebbe had this idea of the Yadai Tahayyim V'Hashireis Olavecha. When you know something in your mind, if you really understand it, you understand it very deep, and you understand it in the kind of way that you connect to it, it'll trigger your heart, it'll wake up your heart. Heart simply means the seat of the emotion. And that's already a wonderful thing. Heart in a more sophisticated way, in a more spiritual way, means the neshama. Like it says in Tanya chapter 33. All over the Tanya, you have the mind triggering. But usually in Tanya, when the mind is triggering the heart. Chapter 12. Chapter 16. Moyak, Sha'at al-Lev, using your mind to trigger your heart. In chapter 33, Moyak, Sha'at al-Lev, using your mind to trigger your neshama. It's a whole different thing. It's much more spiritual thing. So Chabad has a culture. Chabad has a culture. Now you're living in Chabad and you may not even know this because Lubavitch has changed so much. And the world has changed and the Rebbe has given us a new mandate. But the old is still true. We haven't gone away from the old, we've added to the old. The idea, which is called Hizbonenus. You learn and then you meditate, you think, you contemplate. Chabad, real people who serve Hashem according to the Derech of Chabad for real, spend hours and hours and hours in learning and in meditation, thinking. And all of this learning, all of this thinking was the Chabad approach to triggering this neshama. And like I explained to you before, not only to trigger the neshama is to do tshuva, but to remain about tshuva, to live a life based on that spirit, based on that experience of the neshama. The positivity that it gives you, the strength that it gives you, the faith that it gives you, the joy that it gives you, the clarity that it gives you, the power that it gives you. You have to sustain it. Why? By constantly learning and constantly davening and constantly meditating and constantly inspiring yourself. This is Chabad. And the Alter Rebbe is the father of Chabad. The Alter Rebbe is the Chabad, but the Baal Shem Tov is the Chassidus. It's all it is. Just like I spent a whole bunch of time explaining to you that the Baal Shem Tov is the single possessor of all of Chassidus. It's his, God gave it to him. The precious stone, which is the base of the king's crown, was given by God to the Baal Shem Tov. And the Baal Shem Tov distributed, he issued it to his disciples, who issued it to their disciples, and then it came to non-disciples, to plain people. And over the course of the history of Chassidus, which is close to 300 years old, there are millions of Jews whose neshamas were ignited by the light and the fire of Chassidus. There's no question. One of the great Hasidic Rebbe said, not a Chabad Rebbe, that if a Jew, any place in the world, and he was including Sfardim, which is a bit of a surprise, because the influence of Chassidus on Sfardim is very limited and very recent, has an arousal to do tshuva between now and when Mashiach comes, the credit is the Baal Shem Tov. One of the Hasidic Rebbe says, the Jew, any place in the world, is aroused to do tshuva between now and Mashiach comes, if the credit is a dying Baal Shem Tov. That's how the Hasidic matters appreciate the revolution of Chassidus. So just like all the Chassidus of the Baal Shem Tov, all the Chabad of the Alter Rebbe's. And you could actually see it in the Maimonides. Alter Rebbe was an extraordinary human being. An extraordinary human being. In his 68 years, he accomplished what brilliant people can't accomplish in 10 lifetimes. One of his accomplishments is the Maimonides and the Tanya. There's so many others, which we have, and we now have in print. They're all, you can buy them in a bookshelf. Anybody want anything you want. Today we have thousands of money. If you take a chassid from 50 years ago, from 100 years ago for sure, and show him your library, he'll faint from the largesse, from the wealth. When I was a child, the entire Chabad library can fit on 2 shelves. Today you can't fit it in 2 bookcases. Mamish. Because they never gave it all out. All those manuscripts that were kept from generation to generation, a whole series of Sfarim, books, Mamorim of the Alter Rebbe, Mamorim of the Midler, Mamorim of Tzemach Tzedek, in scores of volumes, hundreds of books all told. It's unbelievable. And when you examine all these books, you see the place of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe, Chassidus Chabad of the Alter Rebbe, just like Chassidus Saklos of the Baal Shem Tov. It's a truism. Well, the Alter Rebbe had a son who was born into it. His name was the Midler Rebbe. And today's his Chag Yul, and yesterday was his birthday, yesterday was his yahrzeit. And I was supposed to talk about him, and guess what? We're right on time. It's 5 to 12. Right on time. He swam in this. The Mikkel Rebbe was into Chabad, like you're into, I don't know who you're into, tell me you're into, don't tell me you're into. He absolutely couldn't get enough of it. He's like the marshal of the fish in water, when it rains, jumps out of the water to get a drop out of the air because he wants a fresh drop. He was so taken by it, Mikkel Rebbe. Both the philosophy, both the Maimonim, and the Avodah of the Derech. Wow. The Mikkel Rebbe was almost better at the Alter Rebbe's Derech than the Alter Rebbe himself, if you could say that. He was born in. With the Alter Rebbe's son. You know the story that they tell that the Alter Rebbe used to boast, I'm greater than you. He would say to his son, because I have a son in Rebbe. And the Mikkel Rebbe would boast back, no, I'm greater than you because I have a father in Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe created Chabad. But the perfect Chabad Chassid was in the Mikkel Rebbe. It was his world. It was his world. And he just swam in it. He just literally swam in it. His whole reality was this, in real terms, relationship with God through the mysticism found in Chabad. The study, the meditation, and the connection. And he did it on the highest level, Mikkel Rebbe. And the Alter Rebbe was a doting father. That relationship is so unusual. The Alter Rebbe, from childhood, realized who his son was. And he protected him, guarded him like he guarded a precious thing. He didn't let him fast. He made sure he ate and slept. Mikkel Rebbe was not born healthy. He had respiratory trouble from childhood. And Alter Rebbe watched him like a hawk and spoiled him rotten. Whatever. The Mikkel Rebbe needed my mother, like you need to have a snack. He needed an alignment. It was never enough. And Alter Rebbe would have told him. The expression which summarizes the Mikkel Rebbe's personality is Nune Yama da Aglam Yabesh, a fish from the sea walking on the dry land. He was born in the ocean of Chassidus. He happened to be on earth, but it was a fish from the sea walking on the dry land. He was so enamored with this spirituality. He had a brain that's unimaginable, a mind. We don't know how to measure these things, but the previous Rebbe writes that he was at another level. He was at another level compared to the other Rebbes. The Mikkel Rebbe, the way he's reading the Mikkel Rebbe. Ooh. You get the impression, if Peter Gebbe tells the Iron Rebbe straight out, that Tzemach Tzedek was a great Rebbe, but he was no Mikkel Rebbe. But you know what that means? Tzemach Tzedek was. And the previous Rebbe, it's a mavis, but he wasn't the Mikkel Rebbe. Mikkel Rebbe was. He was an incredible brain. And of course, he knew everything, and never forgot anything, and something very, very deep. So the Torah was like a toy in his hand. That's how great a mind he had. And he used everything he had for one purpose. More chassidus, more chassidus, more chassidus. Was never enough, never enough, never enough, never enough. As a young man, he did it as a consumer. As an older man, as an educator and as a teacher, and as a rebbe, as a master. And in so many ways, Chabad peaks during the times of the Mikkel Rebbe. Seriously. In so many ways, if you want to understand Chabad, not Lubavitch, Chabad, it was never better than that short tenure. The Mikkel Rebbe was a Rebbe for 15 years. 15 years is a hiccup. The Tzemach was a Rebbe for almost 40. The Alter Rebbe was a Rebbe at least for 25. It could be as many as 40. It depends when you start to count. The Mikkel Rebbe was a Rebbe for 50 years. It's a very short time. But I look at that time as a time warp. His Chassidim, he lifted these people up. He instructed them. He taught them how to learn. He taught them how to think. He taught them how to meditate. He taught them how to daven. And he made literally angels out of hundreds of people, not 2 or 3. They could listen. They could concentrate on a Maimon Chassidus, not for 15 minutes, but for 5 hours. And remember it all in order. And not get confused. They had such strong minds because they were taught, they were disciplined, they were reared in the ways of Chabad by the best master, the best teacher, the best Rebbe, the best Mashpia of all, the Mikkel Rebbe himself. 5 minutes. I grew up listening to the Rebbe. It was the most frustrating experience. I couldn't concentrate. I tried so hard. I wasn't the dumbest guy in my class either. I wonder if I can listen to him today. I mean, I'm older and I'm a little more calm. Such a nervous guy. I'm a nervous person, but the blood settled a little. But the Biel Khan would stand there like he's looking at the stars and give it back like a tape recorder. Unreal. Mine. I could never get back on my bed.
It was about your age.
The Biel Khan is older than my father by
I think it is.
20 years. He was the Rebbe's tape recorder.
Oh.
Rabbi Khan. He arrived in 770, a couple of weeks after the guy passed away. He was 20 years old. No, he was 10 years old when my father.
What is Gonsford?
It's his sister. It's his sister. He was a gift from the Rebbe to the Rebbe. He's a brain like I have no idea. And the Rebbe had 1,000 things to do. Mrs. Gansberg from the dorm is the Biel's sister. And the Rebbe trusted that this young schmeckel was going to remember everything he said, write it down correctly, and preserve it. He was 20. Incredible. And listen, he grew into it. His whole life in the Rebbe Torah. This is heresy, but it's also true. The Rebbe spoke to him. As long as he understood that Rebbe was good. The rest of us will take it from him. The Rebbe didn't have time. They didn't have so many things. There never was a Rebbe who had more to do. And there never was a Rebbe who gave more Torah. How did that work? In a real way, the Biel is very, very important. They will ask him, they say, you take a Biel kind of generation, you can reduce the Rebbe by a fraction. By a 10, not by half, a 10. We wouldn't speak less, but we would remember and understand. There's two issues: remembering it, retaining it, and knowing what it means. The Rebbe is all over the place, and he's a very smart guy. But we kept with the Rebbe over the years. A teacher of mine who was a very smart man said to me, we were arguing about what the Rebbe said, but he understood what he was saying. The argument, the word, he said this word, do me a favor. Rabbi understood before the Rebbe was done, figured out of it. Incredible mind. Anyway, but in so many ways, Chabad people didn't let Rebbe. So many ways. Because the idea of the worship, using your brain, to understand the meaning of faith, mysticism, but not to be a smart guy and spiritualist, or to be a new ager, but back to God. And the word that's most accurate, to humble yourself before God. The smarter you are, the bigger Balkaiva you are. But this is about religion. The smarter you are, the humbler you are. That's the goal. The goal is that the mind triggers the heart and the soul and makes you a servant of Hashem. And in the servants of Hashem, the biggest chassid is the most broken one. The bigger you are, the more humble you are. It's not that you're a better actor. You're taka humbler. At the end game of chassidus, and during the lifetime of the Middle Rebbe, he himself, he literally swam in it. He ate up what his father gave, like you have no idea. The end game of Chassidus is not to understand them about it, not to consider them about it, to make you connected to Hashem. Yeah. That teaching triggers your neshama. When you're closer to Hashem, you don't have a big shot. Don't look at me, I'm a master. In front of Hashem, we're humble. Our connection to Hashem is based on our being small. Not we're small next to Him, you understand? The purpose of a Jew is to serve God, not to become an accomplished person. Serving God is humility. So I use the word broken. Yeah, not broken in the sense that you're no good. Broken that you don't think highly of yourself, not because you're not great, but because you're in the presence of Hashem. To think that the mind, which is so connected to the ego, could lead to that is understanding the trajectory of Chabad. And in a very, very real way, nobody represents that more holy than the Rebbe in his personal existence and in his generation, those 15 years. I was talking to the girl yesterday, and I was using my imagination. I was trying to imagine the kind of withdrawal the middle Rebbe's Chassidim must have suffered when the middle Rebbe passed away and Tzemach Tzedek became Rebbe. The Tzedek was the giant of giants. He was godly, holy man. But the middle of Rebbe's Chassidim lived in Gan Eden. They had Chassidim 2 or 3 times a week. Chassidus, a minor. Each minor on average 2 or 3 hours. You had this new Rebbe gives you 4 or 5 minutes a week, maybe. Why he's busy. Come on, just give us a snack. I want a meal. That's all you get. Yeah, but the previous Rebbe was another story. The middle Rebbe, and the middle Rebbe's Chassidim. I gave a class this morning before I davened. I recorded the class at my home, and the middle was arrested, and he was kept in well, he wasn't in jail. He was in respectable accommodation, but he was forced to be there, and they gave him permission. 3 times a day he had a minyan. We had 50 men, 50 Hasidim allowed to daven. No, 30 people allowed to daven. 3 times a week, he was entitled to bring 50 men together to say Chassidus. Which Rebbe of Chabad says Chassidus 3 times a week? Once a week, maybe. Look at the history. The Rebbe says Chassidus on Shabbos, middle Rebbe, breakfast, lunch, and supper, and snack, and in between, and midnight snack. It was unreal. And they had the mitzvah. The miracle, the middle Rebbe is not the middle Rebbe. The middle Rebbe is the miracle. The middle Rebbe Chassidim. They were with him. He created an army of people who were so uplifted because of his instruction and his inspiration. And the end was that it brought him closer to Hashem. You understand? See, this doesn't bring you to closer to God. It defeats its whole purpose. One of the biggest complaints against Chabad. You get stuck in the middle. You learn it and you understand it. Understanding Chassidus is no different than understanding Gemara. The more you know, the bigger a big shot you are. Then you do the meditation, maybe you not the meditation, but if it doesn't trigger your heart, doesn't trigger your soul, it doesn't end up where Chassidus is supposed to end up. It doesn't give you the fire, it doesn't give you the ability. So the Chassidus makes it a bigger misnagget. I may use that word. More you. Well, the whole point of it is to present yourself to the Eibush, to put yourself aside, depending on Hashem. But this is what Chassidus is meant to be, and this is what Chassidus is to real people. You know, Chassidus is, Chabad is very individual. I think life in general is individual. I mean, success is not measured in groups. Every person has to have their own success. But Chabad Chassidus is very individual. Your own work, your own learning, your own meditating, your own feeling, your own connecting. And the middle Rebbe had hundreds of people do that very, very, very well. Very, very well. He was so steeped in it that he never ran out of material. He just talked. And everything he said was new. Everything he was original. His son-in-law, said about him, my father-in-law never erased anything he ever wrote. You imagine writing thousands of pages of philosophy, not stories, and never crossing anything up. He never made a mistake. What kind of brain is that? My father-in-law never crossed anything out. Now, I don't think it's entirely true. I think there are places. But the Tzemach Tzedek, someone said, Tzemach Tzedek, you're a great writer. He said, no, my father wasn't it. You know what a great writer is? Someone who writes and never erases. Imagine a person who writes and writes and writes thousands of pages of deep, deep philosophical discourses, and they were not original. They're based on his father. In the middle of Chassidus, he took his father wrote a line, he made a page out of it. So he's developing a body that already exists, which is more difficult than to write an original body. And he understood it, so he got it so deep, and he delivered it in such a manifest way. It's an incredible life, incredible man, incredible accomplishment. But it was so fast, it was so rapid. It was 15 years, boom, boom, gone. Hearing nothing. But for those few years, so what the Rebbe would say, what the Rebbe does say, is that there were 7 Rebbes. In one way, it's a dynasty. They're all taking the Alter Rebbe's packaging. It's true. The Alter Rebbe packaging and repackaging. They just use it. It's Chabad is one. And if you look at the Maimon, if you understand how Chabad and Fidik Maimon work, all the Rebbeim say the same Maimon. The Maimon that the Rebbe said, of the same Maimon the Rebbeim said, he just says them in his own way, in his own word, his own wording. That's the tradition. That's the history. That's the fact. You could see it in the document. Don't believe me. You can see it in my mother. They're all imprinted it on the show everybody's home. And each Rebbe at the same time was given something. On the one hand, it's a dynasty, it's a chain. As far as that's concerned, it's really all anchored in the Alter Rebbe, and then all the Rebbeim after the Alter Rebbe are developing what the Alter Rebbe said. But at the same time, each one has a unique contribution. And the Mittel Rebbe is the breath of the city. And again, breath is the fun, right? I mean breath in the sense of with broadness, but also means breath. The breath of Chassidus. It's so vast, so much. Mittel Rebbe shows you how much Chabad is. If the Mittel Rebbe had lived another 20 years, there'd be no bookcases enough to hold this way. You have to understand there were so many fires. We have tons of Chassidus, more than Rebbe, but you know how many are missing? So the Mittel Rebbe Tzemach Tzedek especially, the fires destroyed incredible volume of manuscripts that are irreplaceable. Alter Rebbe's, I think we have most. But the Mittel Rebbe Tzemach Tzedek, we're missing a lot, and still it's so much. The breath of Chassidus. But it's not just the breath of Chassidus. It's the effectiveness of Chassidus. You know, if the only thing in your life that mattered was that you should get close to God, you only need the Mittel Rebbe. Because he did it best very well. There's so much more, you know. There's going away from connecting to God to put film in another Jew. That's not the Mittel Rebbe, it's a different Rebbe, you see what I'm saying? But the Mittel Rebbe, what he did for his Hasidim was he maximized what his father created, the Alter Rebbe Chabad, in terms of Kate said, Yovel Avosir, you learn about Hashem, and you think about Hashem, so you connect to Hashem, and you bask in that presence. You humble yourself in that presence. That's the Mittel Rebbe's legacy. You can use those words. So the Rebbe would say to you, the Mittel Rebbe is still a Rebbe in that field. We have a Rebbe of our generation. We have to do his instruction. But each one of the early Rebbe gave a different gift. Those gifts are timeless. In the Maimonim, the Rebbe is. That's the whole magic of Chabad. In so many other movements, when the tzaddik passes away, his movement passed away with him because it was so centered on him. It's true in Chabad as well. But the Rabbeim wrote themselves into their Hasidus, and you can learn it today. I have heard non-Lubavitchers, non-Lubavitchers, Hasidim, they just love the Mittel Rebbe. They don't hear anything else, but they read the Mittel Rebbe. It works for them. It talks to them. Then you have another person who's into the Rebbe Marash, or the Rabban Strachel, who was the Mittel Rebbe's competitor. I skipped that whole part of this. Mittel Rebbe had competition. When the Alter Rebbe passed away, he was a breakaway. But it was only one generation. He didn't have children. He had children, but he would not become an Rebbe after him. But if you look at the 7 Rebbes of Chabad, each one is a different world in terms of what they left as an immortal representation of their Rebbeship. And the Rebbe would say that in that area, they're still the Rebbe. The Torah belongs, the Torah you create belongs to you. The Chassidus that each Rebbe created belongs to him. The Mittel Rebbe's Chassidus and the Mittel Rebbe's to this day. And what is it? It's a saturation of Chassidus, that's over the top, unbelievable. That translates into a Chassidic life, which is so connecting to God. I don't know how down to earth it is. That's another Rebbe. Down to earth, I don't know. What's strange about it is, the Mittel Rebbe was personally very down to earth. He worried people for nothing, what would people have to eat? But as Chassidim, they were not exactly down to earth. They were like up in the clouds. But they were close to God. They were so connected to the Eibishter. Like I said before, I could only imagine. Tzemach Tzedek become the Rebbe, and it was like, I need food. And some said, you said a moment. Yeah, but there was an hors d'oeuvre. That was like cake, it was like candy. So this is our Fabregan. Okay, we had the Mittel Rebbe Yemeledis, Mittel Rebbe Yartek, Mittel Chagagula. Somehow I end up doing this every year. So this is this year's version. You wanted to say something? You wanted to speak? I saw a hand raised. I'm imagining it. Okay, go.
If you could suggest one thing that students who aren't necessarily have the time to sit and learn and let the Rebbe's teaching, what would you recommend?
There's no such thing as one thing. Everything is so vast. I would encourage you, I don't know if you get them in English, to read the letters. There's not a lot of letters. But you read him, those letters are very powerful. Hitler was a very strong Rebbe. He's very demanding. He gave more than any Rebbe, and he demanded more than any Rebbe. In his letters, you read his power. Power. And his devoutness. One of the cutest things, the middle Rebbe had an older sister. His name is Freid. I have a daughter, Freid, and she's named after Freid. The Alter Rebbe said Freida was supposed to be a Rebbe. Will be a Rebbe, but for whatever reason, she came down as a female. She was an incredibly great woman, but she was married and had children. She lived in this world, but she was brilliant and incredibly holy. She passed away a few months after her father, and she's buried with him in the Alter Rebbe grave. Freida. She was a Chabadnik at the highest level. She was a giant. She davened and she learned and she was a big chassid. And they have letters of her to her younger brother, the middle Rebbe. Brudero. In Yiddish, Brudero, my brother will love it. Brudero. It's so sweet. It's so affectionate. It's so human. You could forget how great these people were. She was older than Mitzvah by 14 years, by 10 years, more than 10, much older. And he was the Rebbe. She only lived a few months. She passed away within a few months of her mother's passing. She couldn't live without the Alter Rebbe. She died because the Alter Rebbe died. Couldn't live. But these letters they're so sweet. So I think if you can get a hold of the Mitzvah Rebbe's letters and have them translated into English with the help of AI, and hopefully it'll be half decent. You'll need him. It's not that many letters, it's just a few. In terms of the Hasidus, you should read the introductions to his books. He himself was the only Rebbe, besides the Alter Rebbe Netanya, who published his own Hasidus. The publishing of Hasidus has been done in the last 50 years in America. I guess at this point it's 80 years, I forget. But the middle Rebbe, the old Rebbe, every one of his books have an introduction. Some of them are shorter, some of them are longer. But they're all very good. The introduction, the different sort of the middle Rebbe, the Sha'arei Oiro, the Derech Chaim, the Sha'arei Yichud, the Sha'arei Emunah.
You wrote Sharia for them?
No, Sha'arei Yichud. Sha'arei Yichud is this. Sha'arei Yichud is translated to English. Everyone's into it. It's like really well Kabbalistic.
Yeah.
Everyone, there's a whole Sha'arei Yichud religion. It's the middle Rebbe. You get in English online, 4 different versions. But the introductions, you see him. He's talking about davening. He's talking about meditating. He's talking about not being lazy. You see the work ethic of the man. Also, I actually answered your question. Get the English Sha'arei and just read the introduction. Okay. You told me you better stop. But we're here when it comes to lunch. If I come late, they don't mind. But if I come from finish late, the world comes to an end. Okay, Baruch atah, you know you're in my lunch, I'll come everybody. You can sit and look at me if you want. You can go get lunch if you want. You know what you want?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, somebody.
Thank you.
Do you listen?
Yes, thank you.
Some of it's a little bit up there. The big red was entirely up there.
Things are back.
I'm sorry. In Hebrew. But some of them may be translated English already. And today with AI, oh, Hebrew is better. Okay, but it's his Hebrew. It's not. It's not Indian. It's Russian Kurdish. It's Russian Kurdish.
Okay.
Yeah, you can get it. You get Kurdish. You can buy it alone.
What's, which are the letters in?
Hebrew.
Other the quiche and sweet potatoes and salad. And leftover brownies or the guy who did it called the falafel. Not the, yeah, not the falafel. Oh, not the, what they call.
This book,
I was under the impression that you think Charlie Gazelle was the only person that. What you said, you know, in those days.
He went first.
I just want to mention in defense of a lot of people. I used to go to